Everybody who drives a car will know that they have to be very careful of that blind spot. In fact, you don't have to be in a car. Every person has a blind spot in each eye. It is called the scotoma in the eye. That spot has no light-sensitive cells, and therefore any light hitting that spot has no pathway to the brain. Oddly enough, by a simple experiment, we can see our blind spot. And oddly enough, a second time, your brain acts in a way to fill the blind spot, and so you don't notice the blind spot is there. It can happen both ways. There is another kind of blindness called blind sight. It may occur as a consequence of some damage to the visual cortex of the brain. A person asked to pick up an object that they can't see will reach out and pick it up. Here, certain brain pathways can guide behaviour, even though the person can't see the object. There's a third kind of blind spot. It can occur because we don't want to admit our mistakes. If you like, it could be called a psychological blind spot, but it's very real. Don't miss the point. We don't accept that we have a bias. We've got a blind spot. We don't acknowledge that we are on the wrong pathway, a blind spot. Someone tries to confront you and says, why did you do that and that and that? And you might not have a reason for what you've done, but you'll try to struggle to get some explanation or justification. But then the person who's been challenging you will say, no, it's because you've got a blind spot. And you're not realizing, you're not acknowledging it, that you have a blind spot, a prejudice, a bias. The passage of the scripture today was telling us about, if you like, a blind spot. The passage of the scripture from the epistle says, we aim for the deepest quality of life. We are to spin out of our dark spots and embrace the light, which is the light of a new way of being. So that can be very difficult when people challenge us as to why we're doing certain things. We don't want to embrace any new way of being. Why do we hold on to our dark spots, our tangled fears, our anger in masquerade, our worried blind spotting any possibility of embracing a different way? Well, that's what happens, isn't it? Why do you do things that stress you out? And you're likely to reply, well, that's because of what you do, of what you're doing to me. Of course, the counter challenge comes as the person says, no, that's because you're wanting a person to tell you that you're all right all the time. You are chasing after only one thing, the thing that you think is important. That's because you're not listening to anybody else, you're only listening to yourself. That's because you're too busy. That's because you're not at peace with yourself, not at peace with the world. That's because you're only interested in yourself. You're focused on one issue and not seeing the bigger picture. Have you heard all that before? I have, many times. So is there any point in asking the question, how will you be different? Well, we don't want to be different. If the person doesn't want to be different, if the person doesn't want to adopt a different way that you might prefer or indeed demand, what will happen? What do you say when someone says to you, why are you doing it that way? Well, is there a better way? Is there a better way beyond our blind spots? So what do? We can today, For a start, we can call on the best psychology to help us find our blind spots, to acknowledge our blind spots, to help us control our emotional immaturities, if you like, our blocks, those immaturities that turn into damaging relationships. We can call on our psychology to help us get free of our smaller selves so that we become bigger selves, enjoying the pathways, finding the pathways and enjoying them, those pathways to a better way of being, a better human being. Or if you say, don't talk to me about psychology, all right, then let us go to the second possibility. We'll look for our best models. The best models that we might see that would tell us what a good human being looks like. So we pause. Don't race into institutional religion, because sometimes institutional religion blocks us anyway, blocks many people. They say, I don't want to have anything to do with that. Is that their blind spot? No, it may not be, or it may be, but they're saying, I won't talk about that. It has no relevance to me. I'm not on that part of the agenda. So we won't look at the institutional religion, but we'll look at the person of Jesus of Nazareth for just a minute. In fact, we have very little to go on as we look at him. But we do know what he was pointing to. And he was pointing to something better. Yes, we can be better human beings. He was saying, yes, there is a better personality. There are better human relationships. He was pointing to a different spirit in the world. He was pointing to a different spirit in ourselves, a good presence that enhances who we are and what kind of person we might be. He was pointing to different pathways that can enhance the human spirit. I say again, institutional religion has its necessary structures, and sometimes its clocks get stuck in the past, and those structures stand in the way of growth and enrichment, of finding a new way, a different spirit. And so we cease to bother about the pathways that might lead to the enhancement of human behaviour, or at least we don't want the religious pathways to be our pathway. So a young man got into my car the other night, and the first thing he said was, what does a good human being look like? What would you like a human being, a good human being, to look like? So we tossed a few ideas back and forth as I struggled to find some kind of response. And we named quite a few. We ranged over several things. And then we said, but on top of all those things that you can name, what matters is what kind of person she will be, he will be, deep down in the personality. Is he a caring person? Is she free of angry defensiveness, free of superficial loves and hates? In the deeper areas of life, is he a good human being? Is he thoughtful, mindful of others' needs? Is he open enough to listen to the spirit of things in music, in people, in joyful things from the past? Is he alive to the expansiveness of the human spirit, or has he got a blind spot? Oh yes, we name those issues. Achievements are important. Possessions can be important. Friendships, of course, are important. Past experiences are important. Even hopes for the future. Articulating the hopes for the future, that's important. But what of this deeper aspect, the inner spirit? Because when we come to look at it, we all want to find something good in a person. Or if we don't want to look at ourselves, if you have children, or if you have grandchildren, or if you have children in your life, what do you want to see? You want to see something good in those children, some good spirit emerging, being nurtured, being cultured. So what of this inner spirit in us, in anybody? What is the level of spiritual intelligence? Intelligence. Now, there was a time when the only intelligence we ever thought of was that academic intelligence, that school-type intelligence, that intellectual intelligence. But these days, we know that there are many intelligences. A person can be highly intelligent with things of the mind, but in social behaviour they can be rather in deficit. So there is intelligence of the mind, an intelligence of the emotions, intelligence of social behaviour, intelligence of aging, intelligence of problem solving in the general thing, intelligence growing older. So we can talk about intelligence, but when we talk about spiritual intelligence, well, we don't want to talk too much about that because we don't know what we're talking about. What is this spiritual thing? What is the spirit part? And that has been so often cloaked in religious verbiage that we said, don't come that stuff. We're not going to get into that. So can we observe spiritual intelligence? Can we see it? Can we evaluate it? Is it something that we should be thinking about if we really are going to nurture and cultivate good human beings in the deepest, broadest, most comprehensive sense? We know that many want to evade this notion. For them, it's not important to their life's purpose. To them, it can be sometimes just a large body of religious bunkum. To them, it is better left at the rubbish end of the spectrum. And what is more, they will say those who go around preaching about it, this spiritual stuff, they're either away with the fairies or they've got a screw loose. In any case, the challenge is likely to say, look, there are more important things to think about. We have other things to do. But when you come down to it, the inner spirit could be very important. So in the spiritual intelligence test, such a person who's not interested in it, of course, will score 0, perhaps. Or the person who is into institutional religion totally may also score 0 on the spiritual intelligence test, perhaps. So what is spiritual intelligence? Is it important for human life? Is it relevant to the enhancement of human behaviour? Now, it's quite interesting, I find, that for years the psychologists and the psychoanalysts ignored this completely. That's religion, you don't talk about it. These days, it's a different story. You can pick up journal articles and books being written on this very topic, talking about the spiritual side, the softer side of human existence. Every now and again we hear some good music. It does something to the mind and the brain, and maybe it touches and for a few moments expands the human spirit. Every now and again a person walks onto the world stage, and he or she might only make one speech. We might only hear one speech from him or her, and we know that in that one speech, in that one moment, we are seeing a human being at the very best. Every now and again, people of all kinds, all colours and persuasions and practice come together to do something for another human being, and it seems to enrich the spirit of the world. Is that important? The spirit of human beings. So spiritual intelligence, I think, is an awareness that needs to be cultivated and practiced, the awareness of a good spirit in the world. Spiritual intelligence is reaching beyond our blind spots to become tolerant, generous, healthy, whole human beings. So that's behaviour, reaching beyond where we are to behave differently. That can be part of spiritual intelligence. Spiritual intelligence can also be about it is the capacity to leave the negative past, the angry past, the grizzled up past, the shriveled up past, the hurts and mistakes and the broken pieces, leave them behind. And recover that release. At Sage meeting on Friday, I talked about the first word we needed to talk about, if we're going to recover a different way to live, is to find release from that which is holding us back. So release to live a new way. That was the third thing I'm putting to you today. The fourth thing about spiritual intelligence is the exploration and the celebration of some of the best qualities of life. If you're all interned and you can't celebrate much, or you can only celebrate by getting drunk, you can understand that that's hardly human beings at their best. So how do we explore and celebrate the very best qualities of life? Some writers have given their views on spirituality and spiritual intelligence. So I move to this matter of spiritual intelligence. For me, it has 5 core capacities. It is to strengthen the vitality and harmony of the human spirit. Where do you score on that spiritual intelligence? Spiritual intelligence is about enhancing the human personality, the good human being, enhanced. Thirdly, spiritual intelligence contributes to our way of coping with life's huge stresses, the strength of the human spirit. Fourthly, it contributes to that quietness and maturity of mind and behaviour. And fifth, it provides an added meaning and depth to our cognitive and emotional responses of life. That is my view of spiritual intelligence. Now, it's difficult to say, how do you measure that? Of course, we've been so evasive of it that we are just beginning to work out ways to measure those five attributes or those 5 capacities. The pathways to our highest spirituality are pathways to be the best you can be as a human being. And we want more people to embrace that. That we live on different levels, that we live out our different stories, and yet we search for the strength of the human inner spirit. We search for the spirit to be alive, enjoying the very best in life, bringing out the best in yourself and in others. Now, you see, institutional religion often doesn't do that because we sit in church and we're bored to tears. I want that to be different, to say, can our religion come alive and say, look, and if it is creating some enjoyment, some enhancement, some vitality, then we want to be here, we want to be part of it. We don't want to close down. Spirit, you see, is about life at its best. Spirituality is one of the givens of our humanity. We're all given it, but we let it die out. If we neglect or evade our spiritual intelligence, we surrender some of our very best qualities, or we're likely to. But in fact, we all want to have those best qualities. We want to see those best qualities in other people too. So spiritual intelligence may not be measurable as we might measure the rainfall across one year. No, it may be quite different. But if we can be more aware of that intelligence, just as we are very vividly aware of our social intelligence or our emotional intelligence, can we be aware of our spiritual intelligence as something that we have and something that we can expand upon? Yes, it can change. So it may not be measurable, but by its very presence. It exerts a strong influence on human behaviour, on the pathways that lead to the very best qualities of life. I think we'd like to have those. And I think we'd like to see other people have them. And the whole human community would thereby be enriched. And that's what we're on about in St. Michael's this year. How to enhance human behaviour. How to gather together the various components of which spiritual intelligence, spirituality is but one, but a very important one, which we now ought not to neglect, but rather to study it and expand it as part of the new faith.